Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Welcome, everybody, to today's broadcast of Building My Legacy. I have with me today Jamie Ray. He is a specialist in relationships. And as we build our legacy, relationships are so important, aren't they? And so I'm really excited for Jamie to share a little bit about his story, how he got into working on relationships, and what he cares most about as he works on that. So, Jamie, I'll let you get started.
Sure. First off, Lois, thank you so much for having me on the show here. I'm very excited to be chatting with you. And just thank you so much for having me as a guest. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing with, talking about people building legacy, because I think legacy is something that's so important that, I feel can sometimes get missed in kind of the daily grind of life where we're, trying to make a living and we're trying to provide. And then legacy can sometimes be this faraway thing that we, miss sometimes. But so I'm a dating, relationship, and life coach, as well as I'm a screenwriter and filmmaker. That's another thing I do. But I started coaching last year in 2018, but my start was basically as a relationship writer. So I kind of came into the space via writing. I started my first blog in 2011, which was called The Bro Log. I was in my 20s at the time, and it was about being 25 and, going to the bar and all that. And so it was kind of when I was in my bro-y stage. And so I started that when I was 25 and then with a childhood friend. So we did that for a few years. And then through doing that blog, I ended up picking up a freelance writing career and started writing professionally about relationships for various publications, through Canada, the UK and the US. And then kind of from there, eventually I started to kind of, I had this thing where I wanted to make it in the entertainment industry, before I'm 35, I'm going to make it big in the entertainment industry. And then at 35, I'm going to become a life coach. It was always kind of this path. And then the universe had other plans. And I basically started getting kind of these whispers, people were sending me messages on Instagram and social media being like, I read your article on the Good Men Project. It really moved me. It really helped me through a tough time. I was going through a breakup, and your article, really helped me move forward. And so I started getting more and more of these kind of messages. And I honestly just at that point began to feel called towards coaching, called towards, helping people in their relationships. And I started dating my current partner who's also a relationship coach, and she'd been doing it for 10 years. And so it's just kind of this sequence of events where I started off writing about relationships, and then eventually I felt called to do it in a deeper, greater capacity as a relationship coach. And then obviously doing it as well. I do stuff with people in dating and life coaching. But yeah, so that was kind of my call into coaching. And that was a couple of years ago now. So
one of the things, Jamie, that drew me to you is there's a lightness about you, a positiveness about you and what you write about. And I think relationships can get very heavy and we can get lost in so much of that. So what is it that brings that positivity into relationship coaching for you?
Well, obviously in the relationship space, for whoever is listening, who's familiar, there's this huge movement of right now of conscious relationships. I feel like just everyone in general is kind of becoming more awake, more self-aware. There's this huge kind of woke movement right now. But, people who are studying relational education, there's a term that people are using a lot. It's processing. So people are always processing their emotions. They're always processing their childhood trauma. They're always processing their triggers. And there is kind of an inherent heaviness that can come with the relationship space. And my whole thing was, I'm also a comedian. So, humor, I love to laugh. Humor is important to me. And as I started to get into the relational space, I just felt that it was really, really heavy. And I'm like, you know what? I really enjoy this stuff that's deep. There's a lot of depth to it. But I also want to bring lightness to it because that's who I am. So it's more so I just wanted to bring all who I was to the space, which is half the time I'm going to be weird, silly, make really kind of offhanded jokes. And then the other half of the time, let's do really, really sacred work. And I've also just found the process of healing, like when I work with clients, it can be really, really heavy. Like some of the terrain that we're moving through with clients is really heavy. And occasionally, making a joke when you're on a call or bringing a lightness, it makes the healing process more tolerable for people. Because when we're, doing such deep work, I think it's important to be like, okay, let's go up to the surface and let's take a big sigh of relief and let's just breathe for a second. And I just wanted to bring all who I was to the space. And I really noticed kind of in the space that everyone was so serious. And I was like, I'm also a comedian. So I felt that I potentially had that unique offering to bring. And I've just felt it's been a really great addition when I am working with clients in deep terrain to be able to lighten things up, to be able to make that inappropriate joke that, someone can, the whole group can laugh hysterically. And I think it just really, brings out the humanness of people, because as humans, we're complicated, we're complex. There's many layers to us. And that's kind of just what I felt, bringing the humor really brought to people in kind of, helping build that sacred container for healing.
It's interesting you say that, because I think early in my life as a mom was dealing with some issues with a child. And one of the things that my mother talked about was, if you can't laugh at yourself and what's going on, you're going to have trouble, which is part of what you're talking about, right? Because so much of life is messy. And if you can't laugh at its messiness, it becomes difficult.
100%. Like I always remember the one thing my mom would always tell me about relationships that stuck with me. She's like, you're screwed if you can't laugh with your partner. Like you have to be able to laugh with your partner. And then she would always reference, her friends and their relationships, and the strongest ones were the ones who had always been through the most, but really had compatible senses of humor and were able to laugh through things. And I honestly think humor, not only for the healing process, but just in your relationship, having compatible senses of humor and being able to laugh is so important. Pleasure is so important to your relationship, just as much as, processing and maybe doing the work and having those hard conversations. On the flip side of that, like being able to bring pleasure and joy and fun to your relationship is so key. And I think it's really going to help a relationship last.
So tell me, as you have worked with people, what are some of the biggest challenges that you find people face in dealing with their relationships? If you were to name the top 3, what would those be?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, I would probably say, like, first off, just the lack of awareness, I think, that people have, and generally speaking, about what really creates an amazing relationship. One thing that I found from working with clients and just from people in general, they're always like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know all this stuff was actually related, or this stuff actually contributed to creating an incredible relationship. So a lot of the work I do with people is on family enmeshment and going into the family system and, going to kind of the origin of those adaptations that we make in childhood. And I think for people, it's straight up just a lot of awareness about where our relational patterning actually comes from, because oftentimes what we do is we're going to model what the type of relational dynamics that our parents had, or we're going to choose something that's the complete opposite. And oftentimes what we're really doing when we're, looking for a relationship, we're essentially looking for the love of the parent who we had the hardest time getting in childhood.
Yes.
And so often people will essentially bring their childhood longings with love from their primary caregivers into the romantic relationships. And, that's why sometimes someone can be in a relationship and they're like, oh, like that person, you're trying to win mom's love. Or really what you want is your dad. And I think just people not understanding, rightfully so, not having done the work and stuff. Go ahead.
We're having some feedback on the mic at the moment.
Are we? Should I take the mic off?
Yeah, maybe so.
Can you hear me?
I think it's better. So let's just go back to the former sentence and we'll cut this off.
Sure. Sorry about that. So I just was saying, I think it's kind of the lack of awareness, rightfully so, for people just, not having explored this work, that what actually, contributes to our relational patterning is essentially the longings that we had from childhood, So that a big question that I'm always asking my clients once we kind of get into it is, what is the one thing you wanted in your childhood and you never got? What are the words that you needed to hear from mom and dad that would have changed your life? And I call this relational bypassing, where we move into relationship where we're trying to win over the love from childhood, where we're essentially trying to rewrite our childhood love stories in a relational dynamic. So I guess to answer part one of your question, that it's, just kind of the lack of awareness with what actually creates these relational patterns. And another thing I think is huge with people is that it's really confronting, because basically what relationships are a feelings arena. We can't intellectualize our way to a great relationship. And I really don't feel, unless we grew up in a home where, our parents helped regulate our emotions and gave us feedback on our emotions and really helped provide a container, which is not a lot of families. I feel like, unless we grew up really learning those skills to deal with our emotions, then emotions become this really, really scary thing, and in order to succeed in a relationship, we have to be able to feel into our emotions. We have to essentially be able to sit in our own discomfort. And so much of relationships is what's your tolerance like for being uncomfortable? What's your tolerance to be with your own pain? Because when we can't be with our own pain, we're going to use that partner to, as a safety blanket to try to protect us from our own pain. And a relationship is not a place where we go to avoid pain. Relationship's a place where we go to meet our pain. But we go to meet our pain with more courage, with more confidence, with more awareness, with more safety, because of the dynamic we've set up with our partner. And so I think another thing with people in, creating really great relationships is that it's confronting and there's a lot of fear. And then another thing as well that's just coming up for me from that question you said is that, our egos won't survive in a relationship. It's important to have a little bit of ego to discern ego is important, because we wouldn't be able to be ambitious without ego. We wouldn't be able to feel like we're worthy of the love of our partner if we didn't have a little bit of ego. But what happens when, couples can get on these tracks of trying to be right all the time, and it becomes a battle of egos? And I always say that the relational hero is the first one to drop their sword. This means it's the first one to be vulnerable. It's the first one to surrender into their heart. It's the first one to say, you know what, being connected right now is more important than being right. And if you have two people in a relationship that want to be right, you're going down on a track like this all the time. Everyone's trying to prove their point. And I forget the book that I read this in, but it was about conflict. And it was basically saying that, we move into conflict with our partners, and what we want to be like, oh, this is 70% your fault and 30% my fault. And what it says in the book is that it's 100. So rather than thinking of the problem or the conflict as 100%, think of it as 200%. And you each have to claim 100%. So that person claims 100%, that person claims 100%. So you take ownership. And what you're doing in that moment is, first off, you're taking accountability and ownership for your side of the equation. And secondly, you're prioritizing being connected. Because if you try to, point fingers and be like, you're this much in the fault, I'm this much in the fault, then you're not going to be connected. You're going to be a battle of superiority, and someone's got to lose. And if someone's losing in your relationship, you're not actually connected.
It's what's fascinating about what you're talking about, Jamie, is it is also what impacts us in corporations, right? I mean, we see a tremendous amount of overwhelm and stress at work. We see people getting ready to leave, perhaps being CEO of a major corporation or C-suite or wherever, and now they're looking at building legacy. But legacy, if you don't have relationships, it's very hard to get to that next step, because legacy requires relationships.
Yeah. And I think it's just, we need to depend on people. I think, sometimes our society can, really glorify being super independent. Being independent is great, but we need to be interdependent. We need to be, it's important in some element that we actually do depend on people, and having incredible relationships. Healthy relationships are about healthy attachment. So it's, being able to depend on yourself, being able to be resilient in yourself, but as well as having a really healthy, thriving connection with people. And the thing that's really big in relationships is that how we do relationships in one area of our life is how we do relationships in all areas of our life. So for example, if we're going to bring it into like, corporations or the business environment, say there's a boss or there's an executive who's very, very conflict avoidant. If he's conflict avoidant in the workplace, he's going to be conflict avoidant in his romantic relationships. It's probably going to be even worse in his romantic relationships because now there's emotional investment, because now a romantic relationship mirrors the attachment bonding that we experience with our parents. And so, I think that's really important for people to know is that, if we're single or whatever, it doesn't matter, but there's so much ample time to improve our capacity for great relationships by doing it with our friends, by doing it with our family, by in the workplace, just really creating, healthy dynamics where we're transparent and we out our shame and we speak our truth. And if we really have healthy connections in our workplace with our coworkers, that's going to bleed over into how we do relationships in our romantic relationships.
Yeah. What's fascinating about that, Jamie, is I look at so many people who are getting ready to retire, that last phase of life. Mm-hmm. Some people have been in and out of relationships, maybe 3, 4, 5, right? Mm-hmm. But it's that last phase where you're looking for somebody to walk beside you to build that last piece that you want to build. But if you haven't learned how to do that relationship piece, it's really hard to get somebody to walk with you in that phase of life. And I think so many people come to that and they go, well, look at how successful I've been. Of course, everybody's going to want to step up and be a part of it, right? And sometimes it's a real discovery for people to realize that's not true.
Yeah, and I think too as well, if we have a lot of, say, success in our career, but maybe we shied away from relationships because maybe we didn't feel like we had the time, or maybe there was just, again, a bit of a fear because we knew that we would be confronted with our deeper emotional terrain. And then there can be this element where that can actually increase fear in some capacity because we don't want to be bad at it. And I think it's really important with improving ourselves in relationships. There's a willingness to kind of suck. There's a willingness to, and there's a lot of shame that can come with that. But I think it's important for all of us to embrace the fact we're not going to be good right away. Embrace the fact that we're going to, open up to someone new we're seeing. Maybe we open up to our wife, to our husband, and it's foreign territory. And maybe we're going to be shaking a bit. Maybe we're going to be really, really nervous. Maybe we're not going to speak the most eloquent that we could possibly speak. But just the fact that we move into those territories, even if we're bad at it at first, we're going to improve our capacity to have those hard conversations. We're going to improve our capacity to have incredible relationships. And, and also too with relationships, I think there's a lot of, we want to meet someone and just have it be great right away. We want to, it's that whole thing, like me growing up, I had a template where it was very Hollywood, very Romeo and Juliet. I see a woman from across a crowded room and I just know that she's a woman that I want to spend my life with. And I always say that in order for the dream of true love to be born, we have to kill the fantasy of young wounded love. And the fantasy is that this love will save me. The fantasy is that this love will complete me. The fantasy is that this relationship is the thing that I've been looking for. This relationship is the destiny. It's the horizon that I have been marching towards. So, we have to be able to make ourselves whole and happy without partnership. Because if we move into a relationship hoping that person's going to be able to complete us, we're just going to be projecting onto that person. We're going to be, we're not going to be able to fill up our own cup. So that's why it's so important where we're able to go deep into, our own traumas, our own, childhood pains, our own things that have historically struggled us, and be able to sit with those things, just gain awareness over those things, and really kind of begin to get in process of our ultimate reclamation just within ourselves. And then you can write a different story, because then you'll meet someone who's also been doing that work. And what will happen is you'll make each other incredibly happy, and it'll be this incredible relationship, but you won't be completely dependent on each other. You'll be in this relationship because life is just better with this person. This relationship makes me happy, and it's a great additive to my life, but it's not my whole life.
Right. Part of what you're saying for me as I'm listening to you, Jamie, is that there's completeness begins when you have a sense of who you are and a sense of your own purpose.
Yes.
Right? And I think so many times we look for a partner to create that purpose and meaning, or we look to a career to create that purpose and meaning. And when we do, we get incredibly disappointed.
100%. And if we look for that, then we're going to continue looking for that with more and more partners. We're going to be with that person and be like, oh, like, this, because you're going to reach that point in that relationship where this relationship's forcing you to meet yourself. Because that's really what happens in a relationship. It becomes a mirror for yourself. And if you can't be with your own discomfort, then when that relationship gets difficult, you're going to be like, I can't deal with this. I'm just going to go on and try to find another relationship. But yeah, and I think a big thing with people, and I've coached singles a lot and taken people through dating programs. And one of the biggest things that we include in that is how much purpose do you have in your life, not in the romantic arena? What is your genius zone? What is your, what are your greatest gifts? What's your purpose that you want to bring to the world? What's your dharma? And if we don't have purpose in our career, if we don't feel, connected to a soul tribe of friends, then we are really going to put a lot of pressure in the romantic arena, looking for this relationship to kind of fulfill us and bring us happiness. And that's why it's so important. I always say to people too, when they're single, are you prepared to die alone?
Oh, because interesting. And why do you ask that?
Because basically we need, we're not actually ready for a relationship until we're prepared to die alone. Meaning we're really complete in ourselves. And of course we all want to meet someone and share a life with someone, but it's gotten to the point where we've fallen so in love with ourselves. And I don't mean that in like an egocentric way, but we've fallen so in love with our life. With our friends, we feel deeply connected. We have intimate connections with our friends that we feel nourished. Maybe we have really increased our capacity for intimacy with some of our family members. We are able to sit in our own stillness and we're engaging in activities that allow us to connect to our soul. And the thing is, we can't find a relationship that's actually good for our soul until we're living in a way that's good for our soul. And how we discern who's going to be an incredible partner and actually someone that we want to grow with is we're actually making choices in our life that really nourish our soul on a deep level. We've chosen friends who are really aligned, who actually allow us to be seen. We're engaging in a career that, is more than money, that just brings us purpose on a really deep level. And we actually feel a value. We feel that we're in service. We feel that we're in contribution because, we all want to go through our life feeling like we're in contribution, feeling like we really kind of maximized on our own unique offering, whatever's unique and special inside of us. We all, there's a unity consciousness. We all want the same things. We all want love. We all want connection. We all want purpose.
So, what's interesting as you talk about that is when you look, when I look at what's coming in the world of business, and I think just all of the different things out there that are being developed, the next frontier is going to be what I think of as being ecosystem connections. So we can't be partners with everything. We can't own everything. We can't merge with everything. We can't buy everything. But the world is such that we have to have connections. We've got to have those where we can relate, we can trust, we can move together, maintain that, but also then move to other places when we need to. So there's this mutual give and take, a sharing and a growth that occurs. And I think so many people, leaders, aren't ready for that because they haven't thought about their relationships. I mean, this is big. If you've got to really know yourself, you've got to be able to also be very authentic because no one's going to trust you in that more fluid process.
Yeah.
If there isn't that connectedness or that relationship.
Yeah, and the word that comes up for me, and it's interesting you say that on like a global kind of corporation business level, and the word that comes up for me is alignment. and soul resonance. And, soul resonance within your company could be, mission resonance, where your company missions are really aligned. But yeah, the big thing in relationships too is that we want to have an incredible relationship, but we don't want to have to tell someone how to love us. We don't. We want someone just to know how to love us, and that's when we're relating unconsciously as a child. Because as a child, before we had the use of complex language, we just wanted mom and dad to be able to attune to us, to be able to attune to what we needed to be loved and feel seen and fulfilled. And then when we move into relationships without learning how to love ourselves, then we unconsciously have this weighted expectation. Oh, they should just know how to love me. But the thing is, if you don't know how to love yourself, how entitled is that you expect someone to love you when you haven't even been, either you haven't done that or you haven't had the courage to do that? How is someone going to have the courage to love you when you even haven't had the courage to love you? You won't recognize what love is if you haven't given it to yourself. And you won't, and a huge part of love is being able to accept it. And you won't be able to accept it if you haven't started giving it to yourself. You won't be able to recognize it. You won't believe them. You won't trust it. And so it's really important that we get ourselves on a track, as we do that deep introspection and that inner discovery. What brings us alive? Like, what are our needs? What are our fundamental needs? Like what's our spiritual need? What's our intellectual need? What's our emotional need? What's our just physical needs? What's our passion and purpose need? What's our emotional, intellectual? I feel like there's one I'm missing there. But, just figuring out what our basic needs are. Like, what do we need to feel fulfilled in all these areas? Because how are we going to be able to set someone up to win with us? And I think people a lot of the time find that really unromantic. Like, I don't want to have to tell someone, the way to my heart, but basically what we have to do is we have to create a pathway to our own heart by the way in which we're living, so we can become the inspiration for someone to come into our life and follow the track that we've laid out by how we've already learned and chosen to love ourselves.
So is part of that also being able to accept what you're not good at, but it's no one's perfect, right? So it's your failures, being able to accept some of those and learn from them. But that's a hard thing. That's part of loving yourself.
Yeah, like imperfection is intimacy. And, our deepest shames, the things that we've historically had the hardest time revealing, those are actually the places where the right person is going to love you the most fiercely. The things that your wounds are where the right person is going to love you most fiercely. But first, those are the areas that you need to love yourself most fiercely. And when we can, shame really contracts us. It really constricts us. It's like, if you think of your energy in your body as like gravity, it's really restricting gravity. It's really, it's blocking kind of the container that is your spirit. Shame just clogs our spirit.
Yes.
And when we can out our shame, and we do that with a partner, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, you still love me even with this? And they're like, yeah, it actually makes me love you more because you've brought me more. Now there's more of you for me to love. You've brought me more into your heart. And now there's just more of you. I see more of your story. The most valuable thing we own is our story. And when we can bring that to a partner and they can see us, now we've given that partner the greatest gift, because we've brought them into a part of us that is scary for us. That's really hard for us to admit. But now they really have an opportunity to love us. Those parts that we're so afraid to speak, those are the parts where we're the most lovable. And those are the parts where intimacy is really going to happen. And as you said, we all are imperfect. Intimacy is messy. Intimacy can be gritty, and we all have what's called a shadow personality, which are parts of ourselves that we've disowned, parts of ourselves that we experience a lot of shame with. Maybe part of our shadow is that we're really competitive. We're really, really jealous, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And just owning those parts and really exploring them, because the parts of ourselves that we love and accept, they can no longer hurt us. When we love and accept those parts, people can no longer use those parts to hurt us. So the pathway of protecting ourselves and the ultimate defense is loving those parts of you that historically you've disowned or not wanted to look at.
It's fascinating. There's a tremendous amount of power in that. Jamie, as you look at your own life, what kind of legacy do you want to leave with all of what you're working on with relationships and with people?
You know, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and, you know, there's going back to the childhood thing. I feel like our childhood brings us an innate gift. You know, just naturally, that's kind of God given to us by the way. And because I feel like our parents are our greatest spiritual teachers. And, you know, by the way that we're raised and our families are almost chosen for us on a spiritual level. And so I feel like there's an innate gift that we're given through our childhood. And then we're given what's called our work, which are the ways that our parents couldn't love us. And they've left those parts for us to learn how to love ourselves. And I feel like for me, the innate gift that my childhood brought me was I was told I was special a lot. I was hugged a lot by my mom, and I had freedom to express. I had freedom to explore who I was. And that was such a natural gift that I was given. So for me to be in my vibrant, authentic, this is who I am self, that was something that's all an attribute to my parents. And so I feel like honoring my story and the gifts I was given by my parents and on a spiritual level is giving people the safe space and the courage to move more into their own authentic expression. So giving people a safe container just by how I show up in the world. So if I'm honoring my gifts and I'm, you know, living in my own unique expression unapologetically, I feel like I give other people the courage and the freedom to do that in their own life. And so I feel by embodying myself in my own free expression, I give other people the gift of an invitation to come into their own aliveness, their own power, their own fully embodied authentic self. And that's really kind of the legacy I think that I want to give is I want people to see how I conduct myself in my life and how, excuse me, and how I operate. And I want people to I want to inspire people to live that for themselves, whatever that may be. It's going to be different than what it is for me, but whatever that own authentic joy, whatever that own authentic aliveness and freedom of expression to be their quirky, weird, unique self, I want to, you know, kind of be the postcard for allowing people to step into that for themselves.
You know, it's that notion of being alive, because I think that's really what people are desperate for, isn't it? It's that sense of, I mean, you're driven partly because you want to feel more alive.
Yeah, I think, you know, success in life is soul success. How connected were you to your soul? Because, you know, I think so many of us live without really activating our soul. You know, we live through our disguises, through our defenses, through our masks. And so I think success, this is what I see success very holistically. But success is how connected are you to who you really are? How connected are you to your gifts? How connected are you to true self? And are you creating a life that is representative of who you are really on a deeper level? And because those are the gifts that really last. Yeah. You know, external pleasures, you know, those are fleeting and they'll last for a few moments, you know, for an afternoon. But the fruits that you get from that deeper exploration and living from your soul, those are feelings that last all the time. Those are feelings that you just have inside of you. Those are feelings that have legs to last your lifetime and really drive you and allow you just to feel really good and fulfilled just sitting there, just in stillness in your life.
You know, one of the things that you said, Jamie, that really resonates with that is the notion of you really need to create, as you share and you're authentic, you create a path for people to your soul. So it's that path to being connected, that path to becoming alive yourself or others being alive because they're a part of you. And I hadn't thought of it so much as helping people build a path to you. And then it's probably also to others that you're connected with, because paths usually have other parts to it, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just really, and I think with anything in a relationship, touching on that, it's like what I always tell my clients is, I'll ask them what they associate love to be. They'll give me, like I call it their love mantra, and I'll get a list of things that they, maybe it's compassion, or maybe it's adventure, maybe it's joy. And I'm like, okay, how are you embodying these things in your own life? And they're always, oftentimes it's the type of thing where we're looking for things that we aren't currently bringing to the table. And so it's with anyone who has a legacy, it's like, how are you living that for yourself is the question. Because if we're not embodying it, then we're out of integrity. And, the best power and, how we inspire people is by inspiring ourselves. If we're not inspired, we're never going to inspire anyone. If we're not personally inspired ourselves. So it's whatever our legacy is, how do you show up and embody that legacy on a daily basis for yourself?
For yourself, yeah.
Because it's wishful thinking outside of that, because, like obviously it feels like you're out of integrity, but, is that actually what's most important to you? Because so when we think of legacy, we have to think about what is it that is just our life force on a daily basis? What is it that just drives us day to day? That's something that, fulfills us outside of the external pleasures, that fulfills us outside of achievement and accomplishment. What are those things that we can just do for hours and lose track of time? What are those things that we do that just allow us to bask in our humanness, where we just feel so connected to ourselves? Because always those activities where we feel more connected to ourselves on a spiritual level after doing are going to be those, it's going to be our genius zone. It's going to be our gifts. It's going to end up becoming our legacy and what we're here to bring people.
Jamie, I'm looking at the clock and I'm realizing we're well over our time. And it really has been very, very wonderful talking with you. And I want to just give you a couple minutes for you to share how people can connect with you, because I think relationships are really key. And I think for so many leaders, it's the thing that they keep putting off. The can keeps getting kicked down the road. Someday they'll pick it up and make it better.
Yeah.
And so if people want to connect with you, how would they do that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm probably most active on Instagram. That's, probably the first line of defense or line of offense. I don't know, where you can find me. And my Instagram handle is at Jamie, JAMIE .N as a Nicholas .Rea, REA. So Instagram, as well as me and my partner, have a podcast that they can listen to. It's on iTunes and Spotify, and that's called the Power Couple Podcast. And we also run a relationship school called the Legendary Love Academy. And I'm not sure when this interview is going to be going out, but we have a membership site called the Love Legends Academy that's going to be launching, I think, mid-December. And so if they just look up, it's legendaryloveacademy.com.
Okay.
Just exactly how it's spelled. If they look that up online, they can enroll in the school, jump on our email list, hear about all the program offerings. And yeah, and some of you said there was actually really interesting. I'll just touch on real quick just before we hop off, but about kind of automating a relationship. And I think that's where people can get into that space of just wanting the relationship to be there and to be great, just to be able to come home from work without having to put the work in, and the relationship is there. And so we really have to get out of the idea of automating our relationship. And imagine if we worked at our relationship the same way we work at our job, the same way that we go to the gym to get fit, the same way that we get on a diet when we want to look ripped in a shirtless photo in Mexico. Imagine if we put that work into our relationship, because the most important thing in life is our human connections, is how connected do we feel. And imagine if we felt really connected and seen, how that would trickle down into all other aspects of our life. Because, simply just going out and working and then turning off and just expecting a relationship to be great. The relationship's not going to stay great if we're not putting the work in and we're not regularly carving out time to connect, to really, have conversations with one another and really share what's really going on really deep levels with each other. And so I think we really need to, because things are becoming automated with technology, and relationships are one of those things that we never want to automate.
Right. Yeah. It's work. And I also think the other part that goes with that is there's an ebb and flow. Sometimes it's fabulous, sometimes not as fabulous. And when you're working at it, you get through those dips, right? Because it's inevitable. I mean, humans aren't always at the same high level all the time. There's a rhythm.
Yeah, like you're going to be disconnected sometimes in your relationship.
Yeah.
You're going to be resentful sometimes in your relationship, and those are all realities. And the disconnection, the perpetual cycle of a healthy relationship is connection to disconnection to connection. And the disconnection is a valuable opportunity to increase intimacy, get to know each other better, to learn how to resolve conflicts better. It's a really valuable opportunity to excavate and actually create a better relationship. So that's why it's actually really important to have things. If things were going well all the time, then you would eventually hit this cruising altitude. But
right.
the disconnection periods allow you to create a better relationship.
Right. Jamie, thank you so much. This has been just wonderful. For those of you who didn't get all of the places that Jamie was talking about where you can connect with him, send us an email. We'll be glad to send your information on to him and get you connected if you have comments or questions that you would like him to respond to. Jamie, thank you so much for your time today. And those of you who are listening to us today, thank you so much for joining us on Building My Legacy.
Thank you so much for having me, Lois. This was an absolute pleasure, and I had a wonderful time talking with you. And so thank you very much. This was great.
We'll do it again. Thank you.
We'll do it again. I can't wait.
Thanks much.
Bye.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.